I had not expected the evening to hold anything unusual. Birthdays at my age had become quieter affairs. A phone call here, a polite message there, sometimes a visit if someone remembered. The house, as always, sat in silence, and I had grown accustomed to it. Silence had become my steady companion. So when I saw the box on my doorstep that morning, my first reaction was not excitement, but confusion. There was no delivery slip tucked under the string, no familiar handwriting on the lid, no clue as to who might have left it. Only a plain cardboard box, wrapped in the kind of simple brown paper that seemed almost too modest for a gift. I brought it inside carefully, setting it down on the table. My hands lingered over the edges, feeling the roughness of the paper. For a moment, I wondered if perhaps it had been left here by mistake, meant for a neighbor, or delivered to the wrong address. But no, there it was, written clearly on the label. My name. 2 words, nothing more. No flourish, no message. Just happy birthday. I stared at those words longer than I should have. They felt strangely hollow, as though whoever had written them did not quite know how to say more. And yet there was something about the way the letters curved, the way the pen had pressed harder on the downstrokes, lighter on the upstrokes. My breath caught. It couldn't be. What do you think is inside the box? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss the next part, where the truth will slowly unfold. For 3 years I had not seen that handwriting. 3 long, silent years since my son had walked out of my house with words too sharp to take back. 3 years of unanswered letters, of birthdays and holidays passed without his voice, without his presence. And yet here it was, staring back at me from the surface of a cardboard box. I reached out with trembling fingers, tracing the letters as though they might dissolve if I looked away. The sharpness of the ink, the unmistakable slant of the Y in birthday, it was his, my son's. Something inside me shifted, a mixture of relief and ache. My eyes burned unexpectedly, and I had to swallow hard against the sudden rush of emotion. He remembered. After everything, he remembered my birthday. But the tears that welled up were not only from joy. They carried weight, the weight of distance, of unspoken apologies, of nights spent wondering if he hated me, if he thought of me at all. To hold this box was to hold a fragile thread between us, one I had been afraid was cut forever. I pulled the box closer, resting both palms on its surface as though I could somehow absorb its meaning through the cardboard. For the first time in years, I felt the ghost of my son's presence in the room, and in that quiet moment, surprise gave way to something deeper, a tender, aching kind of hope. After Michael's words, the entire party grew awkward. The soft jazz playing in the corner no longer made the room feel comfortable. I sat frozen, scanning the table. Some guests pretended to reach for more food. Others tried desperately to change the subject. But not my 3 children. Elizabeth leaned forward, her voice as sweet as honey, yet dripping with venom. I think Dad should make arrangements ahead of time. At this age, who knows what tomorrow holds? I just want everything to be clear so there won't be disputes later. Michael let out a dry, brittle laugh. Clear, huh? You always talk about fairness. But everyone knows Dad loves you the most. If he hasn't said anything, I bet he's already planning to leave most of the company shares to you. Elizabeth's face darkened. She slammed her wineglass onto the table. Don't you dare. Who was it that Dad sent to England for a master's degree? Who was it that got capital from him to start their own company? If anyone was given favoritism, it was you. Both turned to look at me, waiting. I only shook my head, forcing a crooked smile. I wanted to end this conversation right there, but my throat tightened. I couldn't form a single word. Daniel, my youngest, who had been silent all evening, finally spoke. His voice was calm, even, but cold. Dad, I think they're right. We should settle this clearly. This house, the company shares, the savings account, they'll all be ours one day anyway. Why not decide now so we can prepare accordingly? His words tore open the already tense atmosphere like a blade ripping through fabric. I stared at him. My youngest son, the boy I once cradled through nights of fever, the boy I carried on my shoulders through the village market, was now talking to me like a negotiator. I placed my glass down. The ice clinked sharply. I wanted to speak, but held back. I feared that any word I uttered now would only make things worse. "I mean it, Dad," Michael pressed on, his voice stripped of its earlier politeness. "I've worked tirelessly these past years helping you run the company. Are you really going to let everything fall into Daniel's hands? Someone who's never lifted a finger?" Daniel slammed his palm against the table, silverware rattling. "Who do you think you are? Always boasting about your so-called contributions. But who dragged the company into debt with failed ventures? If Dad had any sense, he'd never let you keep the majority shares." Elizabeth jumped in, her voice shrill. "Both of you are selfish. Dad won't live forever. If you two keep fighting, you'll tear everything apart. I think Dad should leave everything for me to manage. I can balance it, make it fair for everyone." "Fair?" Michael sneered. "Fair as in you grabbing the lion's share and tossing us scraps?" The argument grew louder and louder, drowning out the music. Guests began exchanging nervous glances. Some excused themselves and slipped out to the veranda. No one wanted to witness this spectacle. I sat there, my trembling hands resting on the table. My ears buzzed. I no longer heard their words clearly, only the harsh rhythm of their quarrel. Each sentence was like a hammer pounding my chest. I looked at each of their faces, the same faces I once cherished, kissed, held when they were innocent children. Now their eyes gleamed with greed, their mouths spewed venom, and all of them had forgotten that I was still alive, sitting right in front of them. An elderly guest came closer, gently placing a hand on my shoulder, ready to say something. I shook my head. I didn't want anyone to intervene. This was my family. This was the truth I had to face alone. The birthday cake still sat on the table, its candles long extinguished, frosting beginning to melt. No one touched it. A party once prepared for joy had turned into a secret courtroom. "What does your silence mean, Dad? Does it mean you agree with me?" Elizabeth asked, her voice urgent. Michael cut in. "Or have you already made your decision? If you don't make it clear, we'll never stop." Daniel sneered. "Exactly. Your silence only proves you're hiding something." I lifted my eyes to all three of them, my throat choking. I wanted to scream, to slam the table, to tell them how deeply they were hurting me, but instead only a sigh escaped, a long, heavy sigh as if pulled from the depths of my soul. For a brief moment, silence fell. Then the shouting resumed, harsher than before. I rose from my chair and stepped away from the table. The screech of the chair legs against the wooden floor silenced the entire room. I didn't say a word. I simply walked, slow, heavy steps. Behind me, whispers rose, then hushed murmurs, but I never turned back. All I felt inside was coldness. That night, my 70th birthday, was supposed to be the day I felt old in the arms of love. Instead, it became the day I watched family bonds shatter. The day I realized the children I sacrificed everything for were now ready to tear each other apart over a will that didn't even exist. I knew then. Tonight, everything had changed forever. When the living room door closed, the noise behind me slowly faded. I stood in the long hallway, the dim yellow light spilling onto the polished wooden floor. The spacious house tonight suddenly felt like an empty shell, cold and hollow. I felt as though I had just stepped out of a dream, or rather out of a nightmare from which I could never wake. I walked into my study, the heavy ironwood door creaking shut behind me. This had always been the place where I found peace after so many years of storms. The desk was piled high with papers, the walls lined with family photos. I sat down in the chair and stared at the frame in front of me, a photograph taken on my 50th birthday. Back then, my wife was still alive, and my children's faces were lit with innocence. their eyes sparkling with pride and trust. I reached out, brushing my fingers lightly over the cold glass. 20 years, and now it feels as though everything has vanished. In my head, their quarrels still echoed. Who will Father leave it to? If you don't make it clear, we'll never be at peace. Those words drilled deep, hollowing out every beautiful memory I had once treasured. I closed my eyes and the past flooded in. I saw myself at 20, working endlessly in a shabby workshop, scraping together every coin to send home for the family. Nights spent awake, calculating every expense, just to cover Michael's tuition abroad. The long hours making hundreds of pairs of shoes so Elizabeth could have a piano, because she once said she dreamed of becoming a musician. And Daniel, my youngest, frail and weak, how many times had I carried him on my shoulders to the hospital, gripping his trembling little hand through feverish nights. All of those sacrifices, I never counted them, because to me they were everything. I only wanted my children to grow up safe, fulfilled, and happy. And yet, tonight, on my 70th birthday, what did I receive? Not gratitude, not love, but cold calculations as if I were nothing more than an entry in their inheritance ledger. I opened my eyes. The familiar room suddenly felt foreign. Inside me rose a chill, a bitterness sharper than any wound. Betrayal. Not by strangers, but by the very children I had loved unconditionally. Perhaps nothing cuts deeper than when a father realizes that, after a lifetime of sacrifice, what his children see in him is no longer love, but only money. I had heard such stories, parents whose children fought over inheritance before they were even gone, but never believed it would happen to me, and yet it had, tonight, on my 70th birthday, in front of all the guests. I felt stripped bare of my trust, of my illusions, the illusion that family ties could rise above greed. But the truth is, they could not. They had already broken. The clock ticked slowly. Outside the window, night draped itself over the garden, the wind whispering through the trees. I sat in the darkened room, the faint glow of the desk lamp spilling over a blank sheet of paper. I took a sip of tea, but the bitterness from the party still lingered on my tongue. I thought of my wife. If she were still alive, perhaps everything would be different. She had always been the one to bind the children together, to keep the warmth of family alive. But since she passed, the house had grown colder, and tonight it collapsed entirely. A quiet anger rose within me, not anger because they wanted the inheritance, but anger because they had forgotten who I was. I am not a vault. I am not a walking will. I am their father. I am the man who gave them his entire youth. I stared at the blank page. A thought flickered in my mind. Perhaps the time has come. I knew that if I left everything as it was, then the day I closed my eyes, they would tear each other apart like wolves, ripping at every piece of property. Family bonds would be shattered forever, leaving wounds that would never heal. I could not allow that. I had spent my whole life building, preserving. I could not let it all end in ruin. I picked up the fountain pen, my hand trembling. At that moment, their voices from earlier rang once more in my head. My daughter's shrill reproach, my eldest son's bitter accusations, my youngest cold indifference, each sound like a tolling bell, urging me on. Perhaps tonight I must do what I had never dared before, rewrite my will completely. The pen felt as heavy as a lump of lead. I tried signing my name on the edge of the paper to steady my trembling hand. The blue ink flowed evenly, still the same handwriting, still the same name. Only this hand no longer held the decisiveness it had in my 40s. I sat still, listening to the pendulum clock tick with each beat, each one pressing the thought deeper into me. Tonight or never. I pulled open the bottom drawer of my desk and took out a black folder, placing it on the table. Inside were copies of the company's share certificates, land use documents, several bank papers, and the old will. That will had been drawn up 12 years ago, when my wife was still alive. Back then, everything was simple. Divide equally, we thought fairness was enough. But fairness can no longer stand alone once greed slips between the lines. I set aside the old will, drew a blank sheet, and began to write the title. Will, Draft Amendment. Below it I wrote the date and time, then started with the familiar opening. I, in a clear state of mind of my own free will. The same words my lawyer, Mr. Pham, had once prepared for me. I remembered his advice. If you want peace later, the will must be clear. No gray areas. I wrote slowly, section by section. I listed the assets, the hilltop house, the old townhouse for rent, company shares, savings accounts, a few collected paintings, and the suburban land I bought when I was poor but kept until today. Then I paused, staring at the name Long Fat Company, the brainchild I had spent my whole life building. To whom? The question rose, simple yet heavy as stone. I wrote Michael's name, then drew a line through it. I remembered the many times he stood beside me in the boardroom, voice strong, back straight as an arrow. He was capable, ambitious, but ambition unbound by discipline becomes obsession, and obsession without ethics becomes nothing but a hunger to possess. I didn't hate him. I feared he would burn down everything I had built. I wrote Elizabeth's name, then stopped again. She was sharp, well-connected, knew how to command respect. But her eyes tonight, calculating, had cut into me. I once dreamed she would use that sharpness to protect her siblings. Now I was no longer sure. I wrote Daniel's name, my hand faltering. The youngest, quiet, withdrawn, often dodging responsibility. I remembered the frail boy I carried through nights of fever. But one cannot live forever in memory. And tonight he had spoken to me like a stranger haggling over shares. I wasn't angry he demanded his portion. I was angry he no longer saw me as his father. I put the pen down. The room was dead silent, save for the wind whistling through the window frame. In the glass reflection, I saw the faint outline of my late wife. You want fairness, but don't let equal become division. I exhaled, slow and deep. Perhaps fairness had to mean something else. I wrote, Long Fat Company, 51% placed into a family trust, overseen by an independent advisor, so no one child holds absolute power. The remaining 29% divided equally among the three, but only dividends, no voting rights. Voting power rests with the trust, managed by a council of three, a lawyer, an auditor, and one person I designate, under the principle of sustainable stewardship. The hilltop house, preserved, never sold, to serve as a family shrine and archive of their mother's belongings, only transferable if the council unanimously agrees with valid reasoning. The old townhouse, partly donated to fund a scholarship in my wife's name for underprivileged children, repaying the debt of our own past poverty. The suburban land given to the one most deserving, not by blood, but by compassion and responsibility, conditions specified in a sealed letter attached to the will. I stopped, heart pounding. Each line stripped away the bargaining chips my children sought to turn family into a marketplace. I didn't wish to punish them, but I had to shield them from their own greed. I turned on my phone camera, setting it on a small stand. My weary face filled the screen, eyes hollow from a long evening. I looked straight into the lens, my voice low. It is now 11:42 p.m. on the date of... I willingly record this video to confirm I am in full possession of my faculties. I am rewriting my will to protect the family's legacy and my wife's memory. Should any dispute arise, I ask my lawyer to use this video as proof of my clear intent. I paused, inhaled deeply, and added, I love my children, but I cannot let that love become the excuse that destroys them. I pressed stop. For a brief moment I felt light, as though I had set down a boulder. I emailed the video to Mr. Pham with the note, Tomorrow morning, 7:30, I want to meet at your office. Bring the will draft template and arrange 2 independent witnesses. At this age, I have learned nothing should remain only on paper, Every word must anchor itself in a witness, a schedule, a proof. The phone buzzed. Elizabeth. Dad, I went too far earlier, but can we talk privately? The best solution is for me to hold the majority. Then I'll share with the others. That way, everything stays smooth. Michael, I'll swing by tonight. Need you to look over urgent company plans. Daniel, don't mind what I said. I just want clarity. Let's talk tomorrow. 3 messages, 3 tones. All spoke of smooth, urgent, clear. None spoke of me. None asked how I felt after tonight. I set the phone down, silenced it. I didn't want to hear more. Footsteps in the hallway. I looked up. A figure paused outside my study. 2 soft knocks. Come in, I said. The door creaked open. Elizabeth peeked in, smiling faintly. Still awake, Dad? I wanted to apologize. She stepped inside, the sharp scent of her perfume cutting through the air. She glanced over the desk, at the old will, the files, the draft pages. Her gaze was a blade, gliding but cutting. Working, Dad? Don't mind me. I just wanted to say, if you think we can't agree, you can hand it all to me. I'll take care of them for you, I promise. Thank you, I replied evenly. But I'm tired. Let's talk tomorrow. She stood still a moment, then smiled, backing out. Before closing the door, she added casually, Oh, by the way, tonight the hall was crowded. Your safe lock looked loose. Better check. The door shut. I stared at the handle, cold in the dim light. A strange chill ran down my spine. The safe lock, loose? I hadn't touched it tonight. The safe, hidden behind the painting beside the bookshelf, had both mechanical and digital locks. Only my wife and I ever knew the code. I slid the painting aside. The metal safe glinted cold. The keypad looked untouched. But the mechanical lock was loose. I entered the code, turned the key. The door swung open, releasing the scent of old paper. On the top shelf lay the red-sealed envelope containing the original will. Below it, share certificates, insurance papers, mementos, my wife's wedding ring, my mother's silver necklace. I lifted the envelope. The seal bore a faint tear as if opened and resealed, a thin line of glue slightly misaligned. My heartbeat raced. Someone had tampered. Inside, along with the will, was an unfamiliar document. Power of attorney for asset management. My name's signature line left blank, but beneath it, the designated beneficiary, Elizabeth. A cold fire crawled up my spine. I closed the safe firmly, replaced the painting. Back at my desk, I moved quickly. I took a thick hardcover, my wife's favorite poetry anthology. In the back cover, where I once hid private notes, I slipped the new will draft and a handwritten letter to Mr. Pham. If I fail to appear tomorrow morning, immediately access the bank's safe deposit box and file the draft, with the video attached. Treat as urgent. I sealed the book and returned it to the shelf, between 2 worn tomes, its hiding place only I knew. Then I wrote 3 small letters, 1 for each child. I didn't scold, didn't condemn. I simply recalled memories. Michael's first school fight, Elizabeth's piano recital, Daniel's river accident when I pulled him out. At the end of each, I wrote, If you still remember these, you will understand why I do this. I locked the letters in a drawer, hiding the key under the wooden coaster my wife had carved. Her voice echoed in me. Hide precious things not from strangers, but from family, because family thinks they know everything. I smiled, briefly, bitterly. I dialed Mr. Pham. After long rings, he answered, groggy but attentive once I spoke. I need to meet early. Urgent. Understood. Are you all right? I'm fine. But I think someone here no longer sees me as a father. Prepare everything. And tell me as a friend, not a lawyer. When kinship meets greed, should I reconcile or draw the line first? He was silent a few seconds. Then slowly draw the line. Then reconcile. Good, I said. See you in the morning. I hung up. The wind howled outside, a branch scraping against the window. The night seemed deeper still. I reached for the teapot and froze. A faint red dot shimmered on the family portrait. too sharp to be a reflection. I approached, lifted the frame. Behind it, a pinhole. Affixed there, a paper-thin black listening device. I stood rigid. In my study, behind the family portrait, such a thing. Not a thief. Family. Someone who knew my schedule, my chair, my gaze. Someone who knew I would sit here tonight. I pried it off, set it on the desk. A speck of plastic and wire, but enough to turn a father into a monitored subject. I dropped it into an old candy tin, sealing the lid. The metal would muffle the signal. Whoever planted it would know I had discovered it. I leaned back. On the desk, the draft secured, the video sent, the appointment fixed, the letters written, the bug dismantled. I had done more in hours than in months. Exhaustion weighed on me. Yet strangely, I no longer felt crushed. Instead, I felt a cold calm. The calm of someone who knows the storm will come, but has already shuttered the windows. I turned off the desk lamp, leaving only the glow of the bookshelf light. Wind moaned faintly through the cracks. I rose to leave. At that moment, the phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Don't do anything foolish. Everything can stay smooth if you listen. In 1 hour, your son will return to talk. I stared at the screen, ignoring the suspicious link below. I didn't reply. I set the phone face down. Before leaving the study, I glanced back. My chair, the family portrait, the candy tin, the shelf with the poetry book. All silent, as though the storm hadn't yet begun. I left. The study door closed behind me. In the hallway, I heard a car halt at the gate, headlights slicing through the window. A door slammed. A man's voice murmured, then hurried footsteps. The clock struck 12:30. I froze, hand on the bedroom door handle. From downstairs, the doorbell rang, long and insistent. Someone pressed and held it. I closed my eyes, exhaling. The night was not over, and perhaps what I had just done was only the beginning. The doorbell rang, long and persistent, echoing across the silent courtyard. I froze, my hand resting on the bedroom doorknob, my mind tangled in unease. It was nearly 1 a.m. Who would come back at this hour? I descended the staircase slowly. The porch light shone through the glass, stretching my shadow across the polished wooden floor. The bell rang again, sharper, followed by urgent knocks. All the servants had gone home after the party. I was the only one left in this vast mansion. I cracked the door open. Outside, the headlights of a car beamed straight at the gate. Standing there, as I had already guessed, was Michael, my eldest son. He was still in the suit from earlier that evening. The tie hung loose, the top buttons of his shirt undone. His face was tense, restless. "Dad, open the door. I need to talk." His voice was hoarse, as if he'd drunk more after leaving the party. I hesitated for a moment, then unlatched the lock. Michael strode inside without waiting for me to invite him. He headed straight for the living room and dropped onto the sofa, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. His eyes were bloodshot. "Dad," he began, "I'm sorry about earlier. I know I shouldn't have brought those things up during the party, but I can't keep quiet anymore. My siblings and I have the right to know what you plan. I don't want chaos later." I sat opposite him, hands clasped, my gaze fixed on him in silence. "Dad," he pressed on, his tone sharper now, "I gave my entire youth to the company. Every major contract, I was the one at the front line. If it weren't for me, Longfat might not even be standing today. And yet, I feel like you still don't trust me. You still see me as selfish, greedy." I raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Michael rubbed his forehead, then stared straight at me. "Be honest, Dad. What have you prepared? Are you planning to give me the majority of the company shares? Or are you leaving everything to Elizabeth, like I suspect? Or to Daniel, the one who does nothing but wait to inherit?" His voice reverberated through the empty living room, each word striking the air like a hammer. I remained still, silent. Deep inside, I knew. Anything I said now would only fuel the fire. My son hadn't come here to listen. He had come to force me to confirm. And when someone tries to corner you into speaking, Silence is the sharpest counterattack. Michael grew restless. He sprang up, pacing back and forth. Are you going to stay silent forever? You think silence is a solution? You don't understand. While you're alive, we can endure it. But once you're gone, everything will explode. I don't want the company to become a battlefield. I need you to give me control so I can hold it together. He paused, his voice lowering. Dad, I'm not saying this lightly. I already have investors ready to commit, but they'll only sign if I'm in charge. This is a huge opportunity. You don't want to miss it. I stayed silent. Every word he spoke only made it clearer. He wasn't here for me, nor for the family. He was here for power. My silence began to unsettle him. Michael folded his arms, leaning against the table, his gaze burning into me. You think you can keep everything? You're 70, Dad. You don't have much time left. I'm the one who will decide the company's future. If you don't trust me, then who? Elizabeth? Daniel? His voice hardened. By refusing to answer, you're insulting me. Slowly, I lifted my head and met his gaze. My eyes held no anger, no reproach, only a deep, cold stillness that made him falter. Michael, I finally spoke, my tone steady. Who are you talking to right now? A father or a safe? He stiffened as if doused with cold water, but almost immediately he forced a dry laugh. You always speak in riddles, but the real world isn't like that. Money is power. If you don't hand it over to me, you're only destroying what you built. I did not reply. Instead, I rose slowly and walked toward the door, signaling the conversation was over. Michael frowned. Are you throwing me out? I stopped, without turning. No, I'm just keeping this house quiet. Tonight has already been too long. The air grew heavy. Michael glared at me, torn between rage and helplessness. He knew I wouldn't say another word. Snatching up his jacket, he growled, Fine, if that's what you want. Tomorrow, I'll talk to the lawyer. I won't let anyone take what's mine. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the sound echoed down the hall. Outside, his car engine roared, tires screeching across the gravel before fading into the night. I stood still in the hollow house, listening as the noise disappeared. My heart beat slow but heavy. A part of me ached. The son I had once been proud of now faced me like a power broker at the negotiation table. Yet another part of me felt lighter, for at last I saw clearly. No more illusions. I returned to the study, checking the hidden book where I had slipped the new will and the tin box holding the recorder. Everything was untouched. I exhaled, sinking into the chair. The room was silent, save for the ticking of the clock. In that moment, I understood. Tonight was not merely my 70th birthday. It was the opening act of a real storm, and my silence. That was the first strike. The clock hand crept past 2 a.m. I sat alone, hands folded, eyes distant. A plan was taking shape, not just to rewrite the will, but to leave behind a lesson, to make them understand that greed has a price. Outside, the wind howled through the garden, rustling the leaves like a warning. I knew that when the sun rose, nothing would be the same again, and from this moment on, I had chosen the path of confrontation. People often say the most terrifying storm isn't when thunder roars across the sky, but when the heavens suddenly fall into a chilling silence. After my 70th birthday night, I understood that better than ever. The house that once glowed with laughter and light had now fallen into emptiness. The chairs around the long table still bore the marks of wine glasses, plates left uncleared, but the warmth had vanished. In its place lingered a suffocating silence, as if even the air itself was swollen with words left unsaid in the quarrel. I sat alone in the study, my hands still stained with the faint smell of ink from the will I had altered that very night. No one but I and my loyal lawyer knew its contents, but rumors, I knew, had already begun to seep out. In my family, secrets never remain secrets for long. The next morning I caught whispers from the servants outside the hallway. One of them said Michael had been on the phone with his wife for a long time that night. Elizabeth at dawn had already sent someone to the bank. Daniel locked himself in his room, seeing no one, but I knew well he was making calls everywhere, probing for information, each in their own way, yet all circling around one thing. The will had changed. I closed my eyes. My heart beat slow and steady, yet deep inside my chest there pulsed an ache. Not from illness, but from the painful realization that everything I had built for this family now dissolved into suspicion. Michael wasted no time striking. Just 3 days later, I heard he had met privately with Robert Carson, his father-in-law. Carson, a sly fox in the world of finance, had long eyed Silverstone Group like a plump prey. With Michael beside him, they needed only a single opening before tearing into it. Elizabeth was no less restless. Reports reached me that she had appeared at several banking soirees, skillfully planting rumors that I had grown weak, no longer sharp enough to steer the company. Once released, whispers like these spread swiftly, unsettling shareholders like ripples on water. Daniel was different. He stayed silent, as though above it all. But I knew his eyes, the way he had looked at me during the party, were far from innocent. Behind that silence lay calculations no less dangerous. And then there was me, the father, the man they thought had grown frail, weary, ready to relinquish everything. I kept silent, not out of helplessness, but because I wished to watch. I wanted to see who would reveal their hand first, who would strike the fatal blow, and who would betray their weakness. Silence, at times, is the sharpest weapon of all. I have always believed that the greatest storms never strike all at once. They begin with a faint wind, gray clouds gathering above, and then suddenly they unleash everything. For my family, that storm officially began on a gloomy morning at the shareholders' meeting of Silverstone Group, the company I had devoted my entire life to building. The grand conference room on the 25th floor glowed with bright lights, yet the atmosphere was thick and heavy. The floor-to-ceiling glass revealed a sky outside, heavy and gray, as though the weather itself was waiting for something to break. I sat in the chairman's seat, my familiar leather chair of over 30 years, yet today it felt cold. The shareholders slowly filled the room. They exchanged perfunctory handshakes and half-hearted smiles. In their eyes I saw anticipation, curiosity, and ambition. They all knew this was no ordinary annual meeting. Today a family confrontation would be laid bare for all to witness. Michael, my eldest son, entered with a confidence bordering on arrogance. A tailored black suit, a bold red tie, shoes polished to a mirror's shine. He had carefully chosen that look to prove himself worthy of the leadership role he so coveted. I watched him and felt a sharp pang of bitterness. My own flesh and blood, once the boy who sat in the back seat of my car listening to my stories of hard-fought beginnings, was now preparing to overthrow me. Right behind him was Elizabeth, my daughter. She was no less formidable. Her blonde hair neatly tied back, a chic business dress, eyes sharp as blades. Elizabeth had always known how to step in at the exact right moment, and today I knew she would not stay silent. Daniel, my youngest, remained more subdued. He chose a seat near the end of the table, avoiding attention. Yet I knew those eyes were watching everything. Daniel had long mastered the art of staying out of the fray, waiting for the balance of power to tip before choosing a side. I sighed. 3 children, 3 fragments of my heart, now each pulling in different directions. Instead of love, they had chosen confrontation. I tapped lightly on the table to call the meeting to order. My voice was steady, but I knew this calm would not last long. Ladies and gentlemen, shareholders, today we gathered to review the company's performance over the past year and to discuss Silverstone Group's future direction. I hadn't finished my sentence before Michael stood up. He wasted no time. Father, ladies and gentlemen, his voice rang out strong, decisive. I believe it is time Silverstone undergoes a real change, a bold change from the very top of its leadership down to its operations. And that change begins with this chairman's seat. The room erupted in whispers. I noticed some shareholders exchanging quick words, others nodding as if they had long expected this moment. I looked directly at Michael. His eyes burned with ambition, unwavering. Elizabeth immediately followed, like an ally with a prepared script. Michael is right. Silverstone cannot remain under the sole control of a 70-year-old man whose health is visibly declining. Father, you revised the will on your birthday night without informing any of us. That decision casts uncertainty over the company's future. The shareholders deserve clarity and transparency. This is not just your asset, it is our future too. Every word from Elizabeth cut like a knife into my chest. I sat in silence, listening, while inside my veins pulsed with pressure. 30 years ago, I had fiercely debated rivals to defend this company. Never did I imagine that one day my own children would publicly challenge, no, attempt to dethrone me before all. Daniel still said nothing, but I caught his eyes, calculating, weighing, like a predator waiting to see which prey weakened first. I struck the table 3 times. The sharp sound cracked through the air, silencing the room. I looked straight at Michael and Elizabeth, my voice firm. You speak of transparency, of the future, but what you really want is your share sooner. Silverstone is not a toy for bargaining. I am not dead yet, and as long as I sit here, no one will turn this company into a battlefield. The air grew heavier, suffocating. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding, blending with the scratch of pens and shallow breaths around the table. I knew then the real battle had only just begun. The room did not calm after the gavel struck. If anything, the tension thickened, hanging in the air like a storm waiting to burst. I could feel every eye on me, weighing, judging, calculating. Michael's jaw tightened, his voice rising again. 48 hours? That's suicide. Investors don't wait. If we don't act now, we'll lose a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Elizabeth added swiftly, her words honed like steel. Father's so-called standstill clause is nothing but a delay tactic. We cannot afford stagnation. Silverstone is not a personal diary. It's a global enterprise. We need leadership that moves forward, not clings to the past. I said nothing. Instead, I simply looked around the table, letting the silence stretch. Silence, I had learned, unsettles more than shouting. And it worked. Several shareholders fidgeted, unable to meet my gaze. Finally, Daniel's voice cut through. Quiet, measured. I support the standstill. For stability. If we rush, we risk tearing the company apart before anything is decided. It was the first time he had spoken that morning. Heads turned toward him. Michael snapped, "You coward! You're only stalling because you don't want to choose." Daniel's eyes narrowed. Better to stall than to hand over the company to reckless ambition. Their words struck like sparks in dry tinder. Voices rose, shareholders shouting opinions, some backing Michael, others echoing Daniel's call for patience. The conference room devolved into a battlefield of tongues, every sentence a bullet. I rapped the table 3 times, hard enough to sting my palm. The noise died instantly. My voice was low, but carried across the chaos. If Silverstone falls apart because of impatience, then none of you deserve to inherit it. 48 hours. Not a second less, not a second more. The independent committee will deliver its findings then. Until that moment, no deals, no votes, only truth. The gavel fell once more. The decision was sealed. Michael collapsed into his chair, his fists trembling. Elizabeth leaned back, her lips pressed into a thin, furious line. Daniel exhaled slowly, his eyes betraying relief. But I knew this was no victory. It was merely a pause, a breath before the storm returned. 48 hours passed like 48 years. In that time, rumors metastasized through every corridor of Silverstone Group, through every coffee shop where minor shareholders met to gossip, through every dinner table of our so-called allies. By the time the independent committee convened, the battle was no longer confined to one boardroom. It had spilled into the world outside. And then, as I had expected, the war marched straight into the courtroom. The chamber was packed. Lawyers, reporters, analysts, faces that had no business knowing my name now hung on it as if it were a stock ticker. At the front, the judge presided with an expression carved from stone. I sat at the defendant's table, not as a criminal, but as a man forced to prove he still owned his own mind. Michael's attorney rose first. He was young, sharp, the kind of lawyer who measured success not by justice, but by the number of scalps he could hang on his belt. "Your Honor," he began, voice clipped, "we contend that Chairman, father's name, is no longer competent to oversee Silverstone Group. His sudden revision of the will, carried out late at night and under emotional distress, demonstrates instability. We seek an injunction to suspend his authority until an independent guardian is appointed." Elizabeth's counsel followed, sliding a folder across the bench. "We also submit evidence that the chairman's health has declined rapidly over the past 3 years. Hospital records show repeated admissions for cardiac issues. We argue these impair his judgment, rendering his recent actions unreliable." Every word was a knife. They weren't just stripping me of power, they were carving away my dignity, piece by piece, in front of strangers. When my turn came, Mr. Pham stood, his old leather briefcase heavy with truth. His voice was calm, unhurried. "Your Honor, competence is not measured in birthdays or heartbeats. It is measured in proof, and proof we have in abundance." He handed the clerk a USB. Within minutes, the screen flickered to life. There I was, recorded at 11:42 p.m. on my birthday night. My own voice filled the chamber. "I willingly record this video to confirm I am in full possession of my faculties. I am rewriting my will to protect the family's legacy and my wife's memory. Should any dispute arise, I ask my lawyer to use this video as proof of my clear intent." The courtroom stilled. My eyes on the screen were weary but steady. No slurring, no hesitation, only conviction. Mr. Pham continued, producing the medical evaluation, cognition intact, memory intact, no impairment. Then he revealed the listening device, sealed in evidence. This was discovered in the chairman's study, hidden behind a family portrait. Its recordings confirmed deliberate surveillance of his private actions. Ask yourselves, who requires a bug to know the mind of a father, if not children desperate to control him? Gasps rippled across the gallery. Even the judge's brow furrowed slightly. Michael leapt to his feet, furious. "That proves nothing. Anyone could have planted that." But Elizabeth cut in sharply. "Don't be ridiculous. If anyone had motive to bug Father's study, it was you." The words lashed across the courtroom like a whip. Michael spun on her, face red. "Me? You were the one sniffing around his office that night. The alliance shattered right there, before the judge, before the world." From that moment, the courtroom became a civil war. Michael accused Elizabeth of conspiring with Carson, her father-in-law, to secure bank leverage in exchange for controlling shares. Elizabeth retorted with bank logs showing Michael's late-night meetings with investors, painting him as a man ready to sell Silverstone to the highest bidder. Daniel, who had been silent, suddenly stood. His voice was icy. "You both disgust me. For years I stayed out of the company to avoid this madness. And what do I see? A brother ready to trade our legacy for foreign capital, and a sister who'd rather burn the company down than let anyone else lead. If anyone here proves Father's point, that greed poisons everything, it's the two of you." Gasps. Again. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes furiously. I sat there, still as stone, watching the children I had once carried on my shoulders now tear each other apart in front of the law. My heart hurt, not from illness, but from the sight of love devoured by ambition. The judge struck his gavel. "Order! This is not a circus." But the damage was done. The world had seen it. 3 heirs not united but fractured, each ready to betray the other for control. Mr. Pham rose once more, voice steady as a mountain. Your Honor, this is precisely why the chairman acted as he did. Not out of confusion, but out of foresight. He understood what would happen the day he closed his eyes. He understood that his children, whom he loved more than life itself, would transform into predators over a carcass. His will is not an act of senility. It is an act of protection. The judge listened, unmoved, but the murmurs in the gallery told me enough. The tide was shifting. Elizabeth sat, rigid, her face pale. Michael's fists trembled, nails biting into flesh. Daniel crossed his arms, lips pressed thin, but I could see it, the realization dawning that none of them had won. And for the first time in this entire ordeal, I felt a bitter sense of justice. After the chaos of the courtroom, silence settled like dust. My name was dragged across headlines, my children's faces plastered on television as symbols of greed, betrayal, and broken bloodlines. Silverstone's stock trembled on the exchange like a wounded animal. At night, I sat alone in my study, the safe locked, the new will hidden, the USB tucked away like a weapon yet to be unsheathed. My chest tightened with every thought, not from illness, but from grief. It was then I heard the doorbell ring, not sharp and insistent like Michael's, not honeyed and deceptive like Elizabeth's, not coldly measured like Daniel's. This ring was hesitant. 2 short chimes, then silence. I opened the door, and there stood Anna, my granddaughter, Elizabeth's child. She was barely 20, her long hair tied back loosely, her eyes carrying none of her mother's venom. She looked nervous, clutching a notebook to her chest. "Grandpa," she said softly, I know this isn't the right time, but I needed to see you." I stepped aside, wordless, and she entered. The house had always dwarfed her, yet she walked with familiarity, as though she remembered running through its halls as a child. She sat in the living room, hands folded, gaze lowered. "I watched everything on the news," she whispered. "I couldn't believe it. The way Mom, Uncle Michael, and Uncle Daniel spoke to you. She hesitated, then her voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm apologizing, but I am, because it feels like someone should." Her words pierced deeper than any accusation. For the first time in months, I felt the sting of tears, not from betrayal, but from unexpected compassion. We spoke long into the night. She reminded me of moments I had forgotten. Carrying her on my shoulders at the zoo, teaching her how to ride a bicycle down the gravel driveway, the way her grandmother once sang her lullabies by the piano. "Grandpa," she said, her eyes earnest, "I don't care about the shares or the company. I don't even understand them. I just care that you're okay, that you're not alone." Her innocence struck like lightning in a dark cave. For years I had been surrounded by greed, by voices clawing for more, by accusations and calculations. And here was one voice that wanted nothing, nothing but me. I studied her, wondering if it was naivete or courage that let her speak so simply. Perhaps both? "You remind me of your grandmother," I said finally, my voice rough. "She too cared more for people than for things. Perhaps you are the last thread left untainted." Anna shook her head quickly. "I'm not anyone special. I just don't want our family to fall apart. That's all. But to me, it was everything." The next morning, before dawn, I unlocked the safe once more. My fingers brushed the sealed envelope of the new will. But alongside it, I placed another envelope, smaller, handwritten. Inside, I wrote to Anna, "If you are reading this, it means the storm has already passed. This house, and the land that holds your grandmother's memory, belongs to you. Guard it not as property, but as sanctuary. Let no greed defile it. Let it remain a place of warmth, even if the family forgets what that word means. This is not inheritance, it is trust. Protect it." I sealed it, slipped it back inside the poetry book on the shelf, the one my wife loved. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of peace. When Anna visited again that week, I walked her through the old garden. The roses her grandmother once planted had long withered, but she touched the soil as though she could coax them back to life. "Grandpa," she said, "if it's okay, I'd like to take care of this place, even if it's just the garden. It feels like home." Her words were simple, but to me, they were salvation. In that moment, I knew. While my children tore each other apart over millions, one granddaughter had chosen to preserve something priceless: memory, love, continuity. Perhaps she was the one meant to hold the heart of this family, even if she never sought the crown. That night, as I sat again in my study, I realized something. Silverstone Group, the shares, the accounts, all of it could be safeguarded with lawyers, trustees, and documents. But the soul of the family? That required something else. It required someone who still believed in love, in memory, in belonging. Anna had no desire for power, and for that very reason she deserved to inherit not the empire, but its spirit. I wrote one final line in my private journal before extinguishing the lamp. The legacy of stone and steel will belong to many, but the legacy of heart, let it belong to the one who remembers. That night, as I sat alone in the quiet of my study, I realized the storm was far from over. The courtroom had fractured my family. The will was yet to be revealed, and shadows still lurked around Silverstone's walls. What came next would not only decide the future of the company, but the very soul of my bloodline. The story is far from finished, and when the next chapter arrives, the truth will cut deeper than any betrayal you've heard so far. This is only the beginning. There are secrets left untold, and reckonings yet to come. What comes next will surely surprise you. The house felt different after Anna's visit. For the first time in months, there had been a voice untainted by greed, a voice that carried the softness of memory instead of the sharp edge of ambition. Yet even as her words lingered in my heart like balm, I knew peace was only an illusion. The storm had merely paused, circling above, waiting for the next strike. Silverstone Group, the empire I had built with my blood and bone, was no longer just a company. It had become the battlefield where my children measured love in percentages and loyalty in dividends. And I, the father, had become little more than a gatekeeper, an obstacle they must push aside to seize what they believed was theirs. But they underestimated me. Age had stolen some strength from my hands, slowed my steps, and carved lines into my face. Yet it had given me something sharper than youth: patience, foresight, and the willingness to let silence do the work of a blade. The morning after Anna's visit, I called Mr. Pham. "Double the security on every document," I told him, "and arrange discreet surveillance, not for strangers, but for family." He understood immediately. Within 24 hours, hidden cameras were placed in the study, the safe was refortified, and my emails rerouted through a secure server known only to him and me. Every call, every visit, every whisper from my children would now be traced. By nightfall, the first revelations arrived. Michael had spent the evening with his father-in-law, Carson, negotiating a backdoor deal with 2 foreign investors. If successful, it would give him enough capital to stage a hostile takeover. My own son plotting to oust me, his father, from the throne I had built. Elizabeth, meanwhile, had been seen entering a private bank under the cover of darkness. She wasn't alone. A man known for forging documents walked with her. Rumor suggested she was preparing a falsified power of attorney, one that would grant her authority over my estate should I fall ill. And Daniel, the quiet one, was no less dangerous. He had been whispering to minor shareholders, playing the role of mediator, promising stability if they supported him. His silence was not apathy, it was strategy. He was waiting for the others to exhaust themselves before claiming the ruins. I listened to Mr. Pham's report in silence. When he finished, he asked softly, "What will you do?" I looked out the window. The garden stretched under a pale moon, the roses long dead. I will let them think I'm weak. And then when they least expect it, I will remind them who taught them the meaning of strategy. In the middle of this web of shadows, Anna returned. She came not with demands, but with questions, gentle, sincere. "Grandpa," she asked one evening, "why don't you just tell them the truth? Why not show them what you've written, the will you've made? Wouldn't that stop all of this?" I studied her, her eyes reflecting the innocence her mother had long buried. "If I reveal the will now, Anna, it will only feed their hunger. They will tear at it, twist it, and when I am gone, they will destroy each other anyway. No, they must believe they're playing the game freely, unaware that the board has already been set." She frowned, her young mind struggling with the weight of such cynicism. "But isn't that manipulation?" "It is survival," I said quietly. "Sometimes love must wear the mask of cruelty to protect what is left." She didn't fully understand, but she nodded, her loyalty unwavering. I saw in her the last thread of humanity binding this fractured family together. And so I decided Anna would be my confidant, my silent ally. The storm was coming, and she would need to know where to stand when the walls began to collapse. 3 nights later, I received an invitation, though summons would be more accurate. Michael had called for a private family dinner, insisting all 3 siblings attend. The message was curt. "Father, this is important. No excuses." I arrived at Elizabeth's penthouse at precisely 7 o'clock. The skyline burned orange as the sun dipped behind steel towers, but inside, the air was thick with unspoken hostility. Michael was already there, pacing like a predator. Elizabeth sat with a glass of wine, her lips curled in the faint smile of someone who believed herself in control. Daniel, as always, lingered near the shadows, pretending indifference while observing everything. "Father," Michael began, his voice deceptively calm, "we need clarity. The company cannot survive in this chaos. Investors are growing nervous. Shareholders demand answers. We must know where we stand." Elizabeth cut in before I could reply. "Enough pretense. We know you've rewritten the will. We know you've made changes behind closed doors. The question is simple. Who gets what?" Daniel added softly, "And if you stay silent, the board will decide for you. Do you really want strangers determining Silverstone's future?" 3 voices, 3 blades aimed at my throat. I leaned back, my fingers steepled. "You want clarity? Very well. In 48 hours, I will reveal everything. Until then, not a word more." Their outrage was immediate. Michael slammed his fist on the table. Elizabeth hissed curses under her breath, and Daniel muttered about cowardice. But I remained unmoved. 48 hours. That was all I needed to set the trap. That night, I contacted Mr. Pham again. "Prepare 3 different drafts of the will," I instructed. 1 leaving control to Michael, 1 to Elizabeth, and 1 to Daniel. Each will look authentic, each sealed as though final. Then leak them, carefully, to people they trust most. Mr. Pham hesitated. "You mean to deceive them?" "To expose them," I corrected. "I want to see how quickly loyalty crumbles when they believe they have already won." By dawn, the plan was in motion. Within hours, whispers spread. Michael received word that he was named majority shareholder. Elizabeth's contacts told her she was to inherit the family trust. Daniel's informants whispered that he alone was chosen to lead, and just as I predicted, each child took the bait. Michael rushed to Carson, boasting of his impending control, securing verbal commitments from investors. Elizabeth summoned her legal advisor, preparing to file claims before the ink had even dried. Daniel met quietly with minor shareholders, presenting himself as the future chairman. By the second evening, their masks had slipped entirely. Each, believing victory was certain, revealed ambitions they had long hidden. And I, the father they thought senile, watched from the shadows, recording every move. But the game turned darker than I expected. At midnight, Mr. Pham called me. His voice was tight, urgent. "Sir!" Elizabeth attempted to access your safe deposit box at the bank. She forged your signature. If not for the biometric scan, she would have succeeded. My chest tightened, not from illness, but from rage. My daughter, the one I once carried on my shoulders to piano recitals, had tried to rob me in the dead of night. Let her think she has almost succeeded, I said coldly. The closer she believes she is to victory, the harsher the fall will be. Yet even as I spoke, a chill crawled down my spine. For if Elizabeth was bold enough to attempt forgery, what else was she willing to do? The following night, as rain lashed against the windows, the doorbell rang. Not Michael, not Elizabeth, not Daniel. It was Carson. He stepped inside, his tailored suit damp, his expression a mask of courtesy hiding sharpened teeth. "Chairman," he greeted smoothly, "forgive the late hour. I come as a friend, and as a warning." I raised an eyebrow. "A warning?" He smiled thinly. "Your children are ambitious, but ambition without control leads to ruin. Silverstone cannot afford chaos. Entrust me with interim authority, and I will guarantee stability. In exchange, your family remains comfortable." His words dripped with venom. It was no offer. It was blackmail disguised as diplomacy. I studied him in silence, then leaned forward. "Tell me, Carson, when you look at me, do you see a dying old man waiting to be replaced? Or do you see the man who built Silverstone from nothing, who has buried men twice as cunning as you?" For the first time, his smile faltered. I continued, my voice low but lethal. "You come into my house at midnight to bargain over bones you think are ready to pick. But remember this, the lion does not ask jackals for permission to roar." His eyes flickered, uncertainty creeping in. Without another word, I rose and opened the door. The rain poured harder outside, the storm howling like my own fury. "Leave," I said simply, and he did. The next 2 days passed in a blur of shadows and whispers. My children moved like predators, circling one another, forming and breaking alliances with each passing hour. Michael accused Elizabeth of betrayal. Elizabeth threatened Daniel with exposure. Daniel played the victim while sharpening his own blade. All the while, I waited. At last, the 48 hours ended. The stage was set, the trap primed. Tomorrow, in the grand hall of Silverstone, the truth would be unveiled. And as I extinguished the lamp that night, I whispered into the darkness, "Let the storm come. I am ready." If you'd like to continue this journey with me, hit the like button to show your support, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next chapter. Don't forget to share this video with your friends, and leave a comment below to let me know your thoughts. I read every single one. See you in the next episode.